There were people desperately trying to get into the country. So, of course, I gave this speech to people saying, why do you want to come to Britain? It's bloody awful here. You know, they arrest British citizens just for returning home. When suddenly I'm being searched, and because I haven't got anything on underneath, because the Israelis have had absolutely every item of underwear that I've probably ever owned.
We do live in this post-truth reality Orwellian world now, where there is no freedom for... This is the mantra that is echoing through Whitehall, through the White House, through Brussels, that anybody who speaks out in dissent against the machine is the enemy of the machine. When you have a legacy media which is so aggressively deployed in the service of this propaganda by osmosis, everywhere people go in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in Ireland, they're pickled in this propaganda.
Today I have some incredible clips for you illustrating our government's brutality, two-tier justice and unquestioning support for Israel. It can no longer be denied that Britain, like America, is controlled by Zionists, and the police's behaviour towards citizens is Gestapo-like. Thankfully, there are many YouTube channels and podcasters where you can still find truth. But the Israelis have just announced that people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are now legitimate targets for assassination because of the Christian stand they have taken against Israel. These two, like myself, shine the light of Christian truth on the despicable and barbaric treatment of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, whilst the churches are silent. In total, I have 5 short clips that everyone should be aware of. Obviously, my channel views are a fraction of Tucker's and Candace Owens, but I believe my messages are just as important, and hopefully my size will continue to allow me to fly under the surveillance radar. My subscribers are incredible people, many of whom regularly send comments or messages which are so uplifting. People who know or at least sympathize with the real Jesus Christ and realize the fake evangelical Zionists are not his real church. An incredible awakening to this is upon us now, so you need to be ready. Please consider subscribing, and at the very least, like this video, as this gives more people the opportunity to see it. I will not be doing my usual wrap up in today's video, as these clips speak for themselves, but I have some incredible content coming very soon.
Sarah Wilkinson. So maybe you would tell us of your most recent of many brushes with the constabulary.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so sorry that your wife has been so badly affected, because you're right, no one is exempt anymore, and it affects us all in different ways. Turkey, who had essentially rescued us, we were treated as heroes. I'm going to put it in inverted commas, but we were. And, you know, we were welcomed by crowds. In fact, thousands of people turned up. And so we go from that, and you return to Britain, and you get off the aeroplane, and your passport just doesn't work. And you are then picked up by border guards quite roughly. It was quite an aggressive arrest, and put in another pen, an immigration pen, where there were people desperately trying to get into the country. So, of course, I gave this speech to people saying, why do you want to come to Britain? It's bloody awful here. You know, they arrest British citizens just for returning home. And yeah, then suddenly these 9 police plainclothes again, turned up, and it was an extremely aggressive arrest in a very, very public place. When suddenly I'm being searched, and because I haven't got anything on underneath, because the Israelis have had absolutely every item of underwear that I've probably ever owned, So they're sort of searching me and it's quite obvious that I haven't got anything on underneath, because they're pulling my trousers and they're pulling my top up, and so I'm naked underneath. This is British police. So I was moaning an awful lot about it, and then the handcuffs were attached to me so tightly that it was completely unnecessary. I'm non-violent. I've been on a flotilla to deliver humanitarian aid, so I consider myself as doing something good, not doing something criminal, and I'm being dragged literally because I couldn't walk fast enough for these police into a police van, which is probably half the size of my own toilet. It was tiny, and they wouldn't take the handcuffs off, so then you can't sit back. So as soon as this van set off, I'm being thrown around in this van, and I ended up having to squeeze onto the floor, because otherwise, I was going to end up with a head injury. And that's how Britain treats you. And it's kind of strange. I kind of came from the hullabaloo of Turkey, who had treated me with such respect, to go then straight into the hands of the British police, who treated me as if I had murdered somebody, and then driven all the way. And it's a long way from London to my local police station. They refused to take the handcuffs off. So you can't even sit properly in a car seat. I was transferred to a car sort of halfway, and they refused to take the handcuffs off because I was a danger. I was refused my phone call. When I got to the station, it's 2:30 in the morning. So they said, "Oh, you can't ring your lawyers. It's 2:30, so you can't have your phone call." And actually, that isn't even legal, just because it's 2:30. I mean, that's not really my fault. So I ended up being given a plastic bag to be sick in because I wasn't well, while they were charging me with these 5 counts of terrorism. Or 5 counts of supporting Palestine, as I might prefer to say, because that's what it is. Now, the thing is with these charges is, even if you get a lenient judge who kind of sees a little bit of your side of it, the minimum sentence for the majority of these charges is 10 years. That is quite a frightening prospect for simply posting articles about Gaza. It's 4 posts out of 70,000. And I think that is a bit like saying to a heart surgeon, after 17 hours of successful heart surgery, you yawned once, so we're going to sack you. I'm continually having to not really work on my case, because my case could change. And that is really quite stressful, but that's the point. The point is to create so much stress that you give up on the whole issue of reporting about Gaza. That is what they want. And so I'm just carrying on, as I always do, but I'm aware that those 5 charges could become 10 charges as well by the time I get to court. It's completely arbitrary. This Terrorism Act is not static. They can change it. They can play about with it. And it's an extraordinarily dangerous situation that we get into today. This is so dangerous for civil society, for journalists, for doctors even, for teachers in schools, for anyone, for parents trying to explain the Gaza situation to their children. We could all end up being arrested. Basically, you're right. Nobody now is exempt. I do understand all the other people that have been arrested, and obviously Dr. Al-Oaden has been arrested recently, and like you say, for elderly people holding up placards. It's ridiculous. And I just hope that one by one we can all end up being acquitted, and the police will realise they've made a horrendous mistake, or the government will realise they're on the wrong side of history, because that's exactly what this is.
I'm pretty nearly speechless, Sarah, to be honest, and I suspect that most of the audience will be too. This is just not the Britain that our forefathers fought for, fought fascism for. This is not the Britain even that existed just a few short years ago. Bad though that was respects. What you've just described to us is that you're facing potentially decades in prison for tweets.
Yeah.
Words in the ether. That's called terrorism.
Yeah.
Unspeakable. We interviewed Sarah Wilkinson just before you, Jay, and she described what could only be described as fascist brutality. A woman treated in this way, Gestapo-like, 9 police officers, 9 plainclothes police officers. We must have no crime of any other nature going on in Britain. 9 people manhandling a sick woman on her way back from the flotilla in hospital gear with no underwear on, searching her, bodily searching her, then tying her in zip ties, tossing her in a van, driving her hundreds of miles. I mean, it was almost unbelievable, the story that she was telling. You were taken off an aeroplane in Romania, where you were legally entitled to be as a European Union citizen and morally entitled to be as a journalist covering an election. You were treated in the way you were treated. I and Gayatri were treated in the way that we were treated. Europe is really going to the dogs, Jay.
Yes, and interestingly enough, I recently met the Romanian politician who I was arrested for going to interview, because the Romanian election was stolen in broad daylight with the backing of the European Union, with the backing of NATO. The Western media completely turned its back, just as it's turned its back on your case, as it's turned its back on this victim interviewed before me. So we do live in this post-truth reality Orwellian world now, where there is no freedom for the enemies of freedom. This is the mantra that is echoing through Whitehall, through the White House, through Brussels, that anybody who speaks out in dissent against the machine is the enemy of the machine. And there's a singular truth and a singular narrative about Ukraine, about Gaza, about the imperial appetites for the European Union, for example, calls for a European army, calls for Canada now to join the European Union. This aggressive globalization is being deployed in a micro way, you could say, with your case, my case, the case of the good lady doctor, but also in a macro case, because we lack a free media. I have lived in Russia for the entirety of the conflict in Ukraine, in this phase of it, since 2022. I've been on the front lines. I've been in Bryansk. I've been in Kursk. I've seen so much. I have a social media following which dwarfs the entirety of them combined on a global sense. I've more American people listen to what I'm doing than the entirety of the Irish population, but yet they refuse to allow me to come on to the airwaves in Ireland to debate the realities about the engine and the germination of this conflict in Ukraine. They refuse to acknowledge I exist. And when you have a legacy media which is so aggressively deployed in the service of this propaganda by osmosis, everywhere people go in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in Ireland, they're pickled in this propaganda. It's not an accident, George, that you were singled out to be silenced. It's not an accident that I was, because we have become a stone in the shoe to this pernicious establishment. We don't always agree on everything, and we shouldn't have to always agree on everything. But it shows you that the mantra on the establishment globalist side is that you must agree with everything. The legislation under which you were detained illegally, in my view, is so draconian, as you say. If you don't answer the questions, you're guilty of a crime. You're not arrested, but you're detained. But if you leave, you will be arrested and detained. All of your personal belongings are stolen from you, essentially. And then you're left in this horrendous limbo, wondering what's going to happen next. It's quite remarkable. You're guilty but not guilty. You are, you are but you're not. It's a terrible, terrible purgatory, legal purgatory that people are being put in. And you and I are far enough up or down the pipe, whichever way you'd like to look at it, that we have a platform and we can speak. But even in people's families, in the workplace, people are frightened to speak out now. And there's a name for that. It's called dictatorship, it's called fascism, and it's called the erosion of the very fundamentals of free European and British society.
Stay sharp, and I will see you in the next video.